Kurzgesagt, home reaction. This is we have to talk about weed, marijuana, ganja, whatever, Mary Jane. I don't know where that come from, but yeah, a million names for it because obviously it's one of the famous one out there. It's I guess it's been like legalized recently. I don't know how like recent years, not recently in America and other countries as well now. I think it's been legal in some European countries for a long time now, right? Which one is it? Amsterdam? Amsterdam, right? I don't know. But yeah, so it's like one of the most vilified drugs out there, ridiculously. Yeah, in America, I know that it's like considered one of the top category of drugs criminally, which is kind of fucked up. So people with a bit of weed were sent to jail in like double-digit numbers in years. That's just ridiculous. It's weed, right? And now, when you legalize weed, when people can actually open shops about weed, there are actually people right now in prison serving a sentence because they were selling weed, which is kind of fucked up. Again, there's two sides to that. One side is like, yeah, weed is legal now, but it wasn't back then. And it's not about weed, it's about like knowing you're breaking the law and still did it type of shit. But in the end of the day, you have to like cut some years to that, right? There has to be middle place because if you're agreeing like, okay, weed is probably not that bad, and we're legalizing it, you can't serve a sentence of like 15, 20 years. You have to cut that down. I don't know. But yeah, it's about, I don't know what Kurzgesagt is going to talk about here. I guess scientific details behind weed, how it works and all that. I don't know much about that. So this video is going to be interesting. Let's watch it.
Cannabis has been vilified to a ridiculous degree for the last century, but it's now finally being decriminalized in more and more places around the world. It's just recently been legalized in Germany, and for very good reasons. Compared to legal drugs
Oh, that's why the video. Because that is German, right? As soon as we got legalized, like, yeah, this feels good enough. Let's make a video about that.
like alcohol, which will cause 1 in 20 deaths just this year, cannabis is pretty mild. So, to justify harsh prosecution and punishment, its negative effects have been wildly overstated. Naturally, there was a lot of pushback, and here's something went wrong. If you followed the discourse over the last few years, you might have got the impression that weed has almost only upsides and few, if any, negative side effects.
That's never
We
true.
ourselves contributed to that narrative. What made this worse is that criminalization made it very hard for scientists to study cannabis, especially its long-term effects. They faced bureaucratic and legal hurdles, and studies often had to rely on small sample sizes. In the last few years, this finally started to change, so it's time to bring new evidence to the discussion.
Yeah, that is so true. When you like point blank just like restrict something, at least you have to have a leeway of like maybe for scientific research we should agree with it. But there's bureaucratic bullshit behind it, congressmen and politician who has agendas like what if there is an upside to this? Well, how am I going to deal with that then? How am I going to sell that to my like people and like my voters? There's many bureaucratic BS goes around there. But in like a perfect world, you would like even if you ban it, you still let scientists research it. That doesn't happen. So that's kind of fucked up in that way. And yeah, weed's gonna have a downside. No way it doesn't. It doesn't even make sense when you really think about it. This is why people should like if they don't want to study any science, they must study at least physics. Physics is base of all sciences, and if you like a bit of scientifically literate when it comes to physics, you can see things more clearly. There will always be something that affects your brain gonna have side effect because your brain is like this kind of a chemical mixture. The chemical process that goes about that, it's like a way of automated systems, right, that we don't fully understand yet. So if you fuck with it in any way, it's going to cause issues. Even like cold medicines, right, antihistamines, decongestants, these things kind of fuck with your brain as well, right? There are some pills that like kind of like work to like affect your body, like immune system, nervous system, things like that. But there are some things that just made to like block certain chemicals in your brain, which is the problem. Anything that blocks certain chemicals in your brain has like a side effect like increasing and decreasing that element. I don't know how if I'm explaining right or not, but your brain adapts a lot. Your brain is like an automated system, constantly managed. So if you overload something, like let's just say you increase certain like dopamine effect, your brain will realize that your increased dopamine effect and will try to suppress it fast. Then you stop taking the pill, your brain is kind of like has a latency, so you lag behind, so there's a big issue there, right? So shit like that. So anything that affects your brain is gonna have issues.
And, well, it's not pretty. While weed is still much less harmful than alcohol, it does have a dark side. It is more addictive than we thought and can have significant negative effects if you use it long term. It seems that... what are you doing? Before you tell us how
I was about
dumb
to say
we are,
that.
please watch the video. To be crystal clear, we think prohibition doesn't work and cannabis should...
How dare you, Kurzgesagt talk about this after all the, how dare you? I didn't see comments, but I would really have to see, like, is there comments like that? This is just fucked up.
be legal, but this also means that we need to treat it as what it is, a drug, with unique upsides and downsides. So let's take an honest look at some of the latest research together. Weed is getting stronger and stronger. Cannabis's magic juice is tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. It docks on your cannabinoid receptors, which affects various brain functions. THC activates some regions and calms down others, creating a fun cocktail of sensations. The more THC, the more intense the high. And people seem to be into higher highs, or at least this is what the market is providing. In the US, Canada, and in Europe, the concentration of THC in legal and illegal cannabis products has more than doubled in the last few decades. While ever more potent strains are bred, products like edibles or...
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I expected more in that graph than what it was. As soon as legalizes, and I'm like, oh, it's like, free industry, and America's great at that. America and like brilliant minds, basically that's how it works, basically attack some, not attack, I'm not using right words, basically tackle something full force if they can, especially if there's profit in it, which is how it should be, and like it explodes in science. So I would have expected like the graph to spike up instantly as soon as it became legalized. All the scientists and all the people, all the labs, all the companies basically invest in that, trying to make more potent thing.
Concentrates with more than 60% THC have become increasingly common, while the share of products with less than 15% THC has declined. Unfortunately, just about every problem weed creates gets worse at higher THC doses. At the same time, more and more people use weed. In the US, more people consumed cannabis daily than alcohol for the first time in 2022. In Canada, 26...
Basic example I can give is like if you eat sugar, pure sugar, like purest form of sugar, like table sugar, whatever how you call it, right? It's gonna cause issues because it's like it's instant metabolism, right? Like instant insulin spike and things like that. Issue in a way like depends on your health, but it's gonna be an issue. But if you eat sugars that are natural, like fruit, sugars in fruit and things, it comes with like an unrefined element with it. It's natural. It's by definition, it's not going to be refined as much as we can do it. So it's not going to cause issue because it's not going to be like instant, like insulin spike and glucose spike, right? We can really extract things. Look at the, like everything we can do. Look at the protein powders, right? People don't talk about protein powders much, but that's like a, like a victory of humanity in a way. We extract protein at a level that's like 100 calories, but you get 25 grams of protein. That's insane, right? So shit, like we can really extract something to it's like, sugar is one of those examples. So if you refine it, it's going to be so potent that of course it's going to have side effects. There's a reason why you should have like a, extract medium. You shouldn't consume something so potent. Even alcohol is like that. You're gonna drink purest form of alcohol, whatever is like 90-95%. No, you're probably gonna die, right? So there's a ratio of alcohol. Even you can do like alcohol percentage.
6% of people 16 and older use it, up from 22% in 2018. It's not possible to say if legalization is the reason for this though, since studies are pretty inconsistent and vary massively between different users. In some, consumption went up. In others, it stayed stable, and the trend to use more weed began in the early 90s and sped up in the 2000s, way earlier than legalization. So today, More people consume more weed than ever before in the last century, and it's the strongest it's ever been. What are we seeing as a result of this? Let's start with something that used to get you laughed out of the room: addiction. Weed addiction and withdrawal symptoms.
And people like potheads, right? Like I remember like Wiz Khalifa, Snoop Dogg, because they were cool, like they were given a pass, but it was this stigma around it. And nowadays everyone does that, right? And there was a period like, cancer research gotten better, where weed can actually help you with the cancer. It kind of like, became like less of a like shaming stigma, right? People shamed you less because like it could be medicinal marijuana, who knows? So marijuana kind of like rose up in the reputation, like it can be a medicine type of way.
A big narrative about weed is that it's not addictive, or at least not that big of a deal. And for most people, this is true. Studies clearly show that the majority handle it well. For 8 out of 10 using weed, it's just a casual high and not problematic at all. About 2 in 10 users develop a cannabis use disorder, or CUD. CUD has 11 different symptoms, from the inability to stop when you've had enough, to using it when you know it will have negative consequences, to tolerance and withdrawal. They can all basically be reduced to you're doing it too often, even if it's bad for you, and it's less fun than it could be. There are 3 major risk factors here: the amount of
addiction, isn't
THC,
it?
how often you consume, and your age when you start using cannabis.
Yeah, addiction has many elements to it. One is like physical addiction, which basically like if you don't take it, you start to like sweat and all that, like all the symptoms will rise up. That's the worst form of it. And there's some kind of psychological addiction, which is like it's not really addiction, but you like, I must have it because I had better days when I had it. Like if I do it just a bit more, I'm gonna have even better days. It's like a mental addiction. So yeah, when it all combines, it's just fucked up.
The more THC, the more often, and the younger you are when you start, the higher your risk. If you smoke too much weed too often, it will have negative impacts on your life. So if this is you, toning it down a bit will make a big difference. 1 in 10 users develops a serious addiction. They usually consume daily, and their life is significantly impaired or held back because they spend a lot of their time either using or recovering from cannabis use. Since their brain is building a tolerance, they need increasingly high doses or stronger weed, often both.
That is what I said in the start of the video, where like your brain will start to adapt. Oh wait a minute, there's too much dopamine. Let's reduce the natural dopamine that we create because it's like a lot of it. Your body will realize like you're feeding it, so it will stop making it. Right? When people take anabolic steroids, they have a problem of like, testicles shrinking and things like that because they're like basically hormone making function, like testosterone things, nearly shuts off. Because why would they do it when like you're supplying it? They don't need to do it. Your body doesn't do if it doesn't have to do something. That's how your body works. Because your body is trying to live as much as it can, right? Increase longevity. So it will try to like not do things if it doesn't have to type of way.
Studies found a variety of negative effects. Heavy users can experience bad moods, feel irritable, restless, paranoid, anxious, and even depressive. In a sad twist of irony, for many addicts it feels like they need weed to fight these symptoms. Maybe it did actually help at first, while in reality it makes those symptoms stronger and more persistent. Studies also found that loneliness and frequent cannabis use go hand in hand. If you feel lonely, you're more likely to use weed, and if you use weed, you may experience more loneliness. It's not always easy to say which came first, but they seem to reinforce each other. So on the one hand, cannabis makes loneliness.
There is an element of like anxiety and depression, which I think is connected to this, how dopamine works. And this is like opposite spectrum of that. Same thing, like dopamine decreases because you're supplying with weed and things like that, that increases dopamine. So when dopamine decreases, this form of anxiety that makes you like panicky, loneliness, and all the like bad mood that comes with it. There's like, fuck me, I can do this. Let's climb something. Let's go for a hike. That element is just like completely reduced. Opposite side of it. There's many exciting things you would have thought of. Let's play Call of Duty. This is gonna be fun. That's no longer there. Right? Shit like depression rises. This is a form of depression that rises up a lot when you do shit like this. So loneliness, like social anxiety, sitting in your room doing nothing, it's a very bad spiral, right? And people do more and more to fight this, and they become worse and worse.
feel much less bad. On the other hand, it can also make you feel more socially awkward than you actually are and withdraw from friends. This can lead to a downward spiral that ends in self-isolation and chronic loneliness. Another thing many people who consume a lot experience is a mental numbness that makes boredom feel okay because it impacts the reward system of your brain. Not great, but good enough. You can spend your days killing time binging mildly interesting stuff, being numb rather than having fun. Boredom is a signal to your mind.
Anybody has ever done like pain pills, like pain as in like opioid or opioid-like pain pills, they will realize that there is like a threshold that decreases. Like how much you need to, cross the threshold to feel like accomplished and like, good feeling, like I did something. That element is no longer there. You can just sit there, watch a stupid Netflix movie like, this day was good, right? I should go to sleep. This day was good. Any other day, you're like, what the fuck did I do? I just watched Netflix and did nothing. And there's like a depression element to it. That's no longer there when you do this. Right? Usually with pain pills like, like tramadol and things, very low opioid-like pain pills, that only lasts like first day or two. After third day, you pain tolerance is there, but that element is no longer there. At least that's how I experienced. Right? So only first 2 days you'll have that like good feely thing comes with it. The problem with that is like at third day, you'll be like, why am I not feeling it? You'll take double dose, which you shouldn't do, right? Pain pills should always be treated as like, use it when there is a pain and not like a prescription like you do 5-10 days, unless like your doctor said, because I don't know, you fucked up your spine or something.
To get creative or learn something new, but this is suppressed. This also makes quitting so much harder because your daily routines suddenly seem boring and unexciting, making it very tempting to go back. If you find yourself using constantly, this can also stunt your development as a person. The numbness dulls bad feelings, making it easy not to deal with them. But in life, you can only get over bad feelings.
Okay, I'm pausing too much, but I have something to. I have a friend who was like in an accident. I think he's like what vertebrae, I don't know, like he damaged that, and he had to recover for more than a year. And he was taking Ultraset, relatively low dose, I'm guessing, right? 50 mg or something, right? Like it's like mid dose, not too strong. But he took that for a year, more than a year. And there was an element like when he like stopped taking it, just like, I'm just talking like, I don't know, man. Like he just like opened up like, I don't know, like, I don't feel good, right? It's weird. Like I remember a year or two ago, I was used to like feel this way. There is no excitement. I don't want to do anything. And I like talked about it, this and that. And I just knew about this. Like, I've experienced it. Not I experienced this, but like unknown about this because sometimes I've taken like, a painkiller for obvious reasons. When you work out, you're going to get injuries. But I've known about this, like how addictive these things are. And I realized, wait a minute, you've been taking that for a year. Holy shit, going back to normal levels of dopamine and everything is going to take time, 6 months or something. At least that was the case with him. I'm like, you have to soldier through 6 months and don't take any pills or anything that affects your brain that way. And after 6 months, he was like back to normal. So, like the longer you take it, the longer it will take back to go into normal, right? That's why rehabs and things are really important.
If you actually feel them, and you have to process them to grow. Lastly, let's talk about physical withdrawal symptoms. The more you consume, the worse they'll be for you, especially if you use daily. Withdrawal can cause headaches and sweating or chills, decreased appetite, in severe cases even fever, nausea and abdominal pain. You might have trouble falling asleep, and if you do, you might have disturbing and vivid dreams. The withdrawal can put you in a depressive mood where life feels daft and pointless. You can feel restless, angry, anxious, or nervous. You may feel unable to do anything at all. After a few days, these symptoms will begin to subside, and after a few weeks...
Yeah, this is insane because tramadol, like I said, doesn't have this level of symptoms, at least at lower doses, like I said. But this is like literally bottom of the list of these opioid-like things, right? 2-3 medicine up, you get to like a certain level, then there's amphetamine, and there's like... all the way to like OxyContin, and there is like even higher than that now. OxyContin is probably higher than the heroin, right? Heroin, what the fuck? And they used to give OxyContin like it's nothing. OxyContin epidemic, right? That was the thing. Now there's another one that I forgot the name, but like it's really strong. It's literally deadly, right? What was that thing that's like it's laced in all drugs or something, right? It's very dangerous. I forgot the name of that. But they used to give OxyContin as nothing. And I'm talking about tramadol, which is like basically the bottom level compared to that. So imagine these symptoms to the people who took OxyContin, right? They took all these pills, right? And they become addicted. They took it for a month. That's basically you're properly addicted at that point with that level of strong drug. And physical symptoms, man, damn, sweating, right? Hives. People get hives, for fuck's sake. That's the level of physical addiction you get. I can't even process that. Like, how fucked up that must be.
They'll be gone entirely. The exact time depends on how much and how long you've been consuming cannabis. Now, let's get to the worst part. Weed may damage your brain. This section was not fun to research because there's fierce debate among researchers how bad weed is for your brain and whether it has irreversible long-term consequences or not. There's no...
People have this assumption that just because there is absence of research does not mean result on the other side. Oh, there is no enough research to say that. That doesn't mean it doesn't damage your brain. That just means like we have no data right now. Go with cautions. This is the problem people need to understand in scientific research. Oh, there is no evidence to suggest it. Okay, which way are you talking about? Have there been like 1 million studies on that, and you're saying there is no evidence? Then there is that's proving that there is no side effect, right? That's different. Has there been like 5 studies and you're saying there is no evidence? You haven't done enough studies, right? So there's 2 ways of looking at that. Like, you really need to be informed on that. How many studies have been done there, right? Anything that affects your brain has a chance of like imbalancing your chemicals in your head, right? And your brain is like so like complex in that way. You don't know which effect it will have. Maybe it will fuck up your memory. Maybe you're just a bit slow remembering certain things. You look back like, wait a minute, 2-3 years ago I remember like I didn't used to like forget things like this, but now I'm forgetting even a bit. Maybe it's because of this shit. You never know. I'm not saying it's because of that, but it could be. Like I say, even cold medicine, antihistamine, things like that can fuck up your brain. There's like labels behind. Prescription H1, and like red color label. People don't even read that. Over the counter, just like pop it up like it's fucking candy. Are you kidding me?
Consensus yet, and it's hard to say anything definitive. Having said that, THC directly interferes with critical brain chemistry. There is some evidence that it may alter its structure. If it does, this may go away again if you quit after a few years, or not. We don't know yet. The consequences vary a lot between individuals, but especially for heavy users, they have a variety of potentially unfunny downsides. The most common one is that your memory gets significantly worse. Sustained heavy use may reduce your ability to learn, your reasoning, perception, attention span, decision-making, language abilities, and impulse control. Most negative effects seem to go away or at least weaken over time after you quit, but again, we simply don't know enough and need more research. Where the evidence is much clearer is that consuming a lot of weed is really bad for teenagers on multiple levels. If you start using heavily early, you have many more years to build up potentially negative side effects. Teens who use a lot are much more likely to become addicted to weed. This may just be correlation and weed may not be the underlying cause, but heavy weed users are more likely to perform poorly in school and less likely to finish their education. They are on.
By statistic, if you use when you're a teenager, you're going to be using that longer than anyone else. That's a statistic at that point. There's other element, like your brain is developing when you're a teenager, right? And on top of that, teenagers are, let's just say, not the smartest people on the planet. They won't know when to stop. So all this combined, for teenagers, it's kind of fucked up.
On average, less satisfied with their life and what they've achieved. This may simply be because if your memory and motivation are stunted, you have fewer interesting experiences and forget the ones you do have. And there is strong evidence that teen users are way more likely to develop mental health issues like psychosis, schizophrenia, depression, or anxiety later in life. Once again, the younger you start, the higher the risk, and it also seems to rise massively with high THC doses, making highly potent cannabis products even more dangerous for teens. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've only focused on the negative sides in this video. That was the whole point. As we said before, for most people, weed in moderation is totally fine and definitely way less harmful than alcohol. You do you, we're not your parents. The upside of moderation...
I don't know, You do you. Screw yourself. We're not your parents. We're not going to tell you if you like screw yourself. See if I care. I don't know why that sentence. We're not your parents kind of added to that element, right? You do you. We live in a free society. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Kind of mild. You do you. I'm not your parents. Screw yourself. I don't care. That's how I felt that. There you go.
Is also that when you do it, your experience will be more intense and special. But for teens, weed, especially using it regularly or a lot of it, is a bad idea, with potentially life-changing consequences. We know that criminalization did nothing to make this better. We now have a new chance under legalization. It begins with being open and...
Let's not get this wrong. If you ban it, chances of safe drug or safe weed is going to be much lower. There's a higher chance people will find contaminated and bad weed. There is that as well, right? People need to realize that. Bad elements might spike the weed with certain things. Like when growing weed, like bad, I don't know, like fertilizer and things, they could use something bad that would contaminate it really bad way, that it could poison you in a way. If done right by right people, if it's legal, it's probably safer.
Honest about the state of science and acknowledging that weed is one drug among many others. Certainly not the worst one by a long shot, but also problematic for at least 1 to 3 out of 10 people using it. If you really have to try cannabis, there is a time and place, and that's in your 20s. If you're younger, the science is clear, don't do it. At least, not yet. You'll have plenty of time to experiment later. Let's do a...
Yeah, well, go to original video page, and from there support this channel. Go to odoo.com/r/ye2 and support that channel. Kurzgesagt is great. Look, I'm gonna say this, right? In the end of the day, here's a redeeming fact about like weed. Yes, everything has a bad element. Everything is bad for you. Any kind of drug. Weed is kind of like less intense in that category. So it's not like, oh, weed is bad for you, don't do it. Of course it's bad. But compared to other things, it's kind of like less bad, but you still should know that it's bad in a way, right? There are people who live 80, 90 years old doing weed and somehow was more productive than they would have otherwise. There are people who claim they wrote whole books, bestseller books while being on weed. That is that. But you need to be careful with it. That's the point of this video. This is a scientific video, right? It will feel like, this is like whataboutism, what about this, what about that. That's not the point. It's not about whataboutism, but the point is weed is like less bad than the other, but it's still like something that affects your brain. You need to be careful about it. I know people will attack Kurzgesagt, how dare you, this and that. He's not attacking it, he's just scientifically explaining it. You need to know type of shit, right? And there's other element that really like surprised me as a society, right? I don't know if it's surprising me or not, but this is the thing. In society, we ban certain things like drugs and things, right? Like weed, we criminalize that, right? But if somebody just told you like, okay, by the way, petrol cars are banned from now. If you drive a petrol car, I'm going to throw you in like 20 years in jail, only electric because world is burning. You're going to flip your shit. You're like, what? How about this? How does this work in democratic world? How does this work in free world? But at the same time, they can like ban something like weed and other drugs like that. But opioid like drugs are legal and are prescribed by doctors, like I said, right? Oxycontin is stronger than heroin, yet heroin is bad, Oxycontin is not. That's why people make joke like, okay, I guess, like drugs are bad, but not when it comes from pharmaceuticals. But this is how society works. You need those drugs as painkillers. You need opioids. When your spine is completely fucked, you're going to need opioids. You wish you have opioids at that point, right? But this is just like weird element of society, right? One point we have this like a notion in our head, like this is free world democracy. Certain things are just common sense. Like I said, banning petrol cars like that and like jailing people for 20 years feels kind of weird. Like no way that would be the case. But when you like apply that to drugs, that is the case. People who sold weed or did weed is like 15, 20 years in jail just because it's not legal. Even though other drugs that are legal, prescribed by doctor, is million times much worse and stronger, right? So weed has its side effect, but compared to other, it's less. It's also like it has medicinal benefit to it. But yeah, in the end of the day, like you should know about things. That's the point, right? You should always be informed, right? Don't just like jump into it type of way. But yeah. Alright, well, that was we have to talk about weed by channel Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. If you like my next video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.